Special Covert Operations Brain Initiative, or Scooby.
Scooby? And wait, what did Scooby do?
I have never been this upset about a TV show. Until I watched Velma. So for the people that don't know, I used to watch a lot of TV and movies as a kid. Gee, can you guess which one was my favorite? I'll give you a hint, it's in the title. I don't know why, but this spooky little series had me in a chokehold.
What kind of magic are you putting in there? Because that shit hits harder than crack!
I watched the original, I watched some of the other shows, and even some of the specials. I watched most of the live actions and direct-to-video movies. I played some of the video games, I had the action figures, I was a fiend! But as I got older, it just kind of became more of a source of nostalgia rather than a current fixation. So I'm sure you can imagine my surprise when I came back to the franchise to see this.
Normally origin stories are
About tall, handsome guys struggling with the burden of being handed even more power. And if they are about girls, it's usually like,
hey, what made this hot chick
go crazy? Yeah, it was me, not Fred and his weird fan.
This is my story, told my way. And it starts with a murder, bitch.
Y'all are just playing with me, right? Who even are these people? These four had no semblance of the original characters left except for their names. And why does everybody in the show have to suck as a person? And they're not even funny. Well, except one person. There were some interesting things in the show, but overall it just felt like a personal attack on the fans of this franchise. So I decided to replace these skinwalkers with some version that goes in a different direction that still, actually respects the source material. Hey yo, Wolfie here, and today I'm gonna be reimagining the dumpster fire that is Velma. All that being said, let's get into it. Alright, so full disclosure, I'm keeping most of the races and sexualities of Velma's versions of the characters because I honestly think that wokeness wasn't really the reason why the show was bad. It was bad writing. If that bothers you, cope. That's it. So where do I even start with Velma? She fucking sucks. This version of Velma is emotionally manipulative, narcissistic, unfunny, and extremely hypocritical. In other words, she's just a mean girl who thinks she's better than everyone else, but in reality, she's just as bad, if not worse. I think that they meant to play on Velma's personality in some adaptations where she's more sarcastic and abrasive. But the difference is that in those adaptations, she was actually smart instead of just being some big old ball of negativity and bad meta humor. Oh, and in the other adaptations, she's, actually funny.
The aliens need my brain! They're gonna steal my brain!
Must not be very complicated plans.
But in Velma, she's this overly critical, whiny mess who judges people way too harshly before she even gets to know them. And that could work as a character flaw, but they never have her grow from that. At least in season 1, I don't know about season 2, I refuse to watch that shit. She also treats her quote-unquote friends like tools to get what she wants, but the second that they're no longer useful to her, she drops them like a hot pocket. But besides being extremely unlikable, she's actually looking for her mom, who went missing years ago, and she has these hypnosis-based hallucinations every time she tries to solve a mystery. In all fairness, the hallucination sequences are hands down one of the only 1 or 2 good things about the entire show, but also it's a hindrance to the story, and it's very poorly explained. You just go and watch clips of it if you can find them. She's also accused of murder in the first episode.
I'll smack one of you bitches.
So for my version, the team is actually in college instead of high school, and they don't really know each other yet. As for Velma, she's going to Coolsville University for a degree in forensic science. She wants to become a detective just like her mom, who went missing years ago after an investigation on cult activity gone wrong. I'll get more into that later on in the video. All you need to know right now is that her mom was declared dead and the case was closed, but Velma believes that she's still alive. That led her to spend a lot of her free time looking for leads on what happened to her mom, but it also led her to put herself in very dangerous situations like breaking into places and confronting dangerous criminals by herself. That also caused her to push all of her old friends, including a girl named Gigi, wink wink, out of her life after they all tried to convince her to be more careful in looking for her mom. And because of that, Velma became a bit of a hermit, thinking that having friends only holds you back. It's only when the rest of the gang get together and help her that she decides to open herself up more to the possibility of having friends and connecting with others. Velma's entire arc would focus on her building strong relationships, and that also includes her love life. So instead of her ending up with Daphne like in the HBO show, my version of Velma just has a crush on Daphne. Basically, Velma spent so much time alone that in her mind, she's thinking, wow, this pretty and outgoing person is constantly wanting to spend time with me and seems to really care about me. Am I in love? But Daphne actually doesn't feel the same way because she's just not into women. She just really likes Velma as a person and wants to help her break out of her shell. She honestly sees something in Velma that most people don't. And here's another thing, I never really saw Velma working out with any of the members of the gang anyway, but there's a perfectly good choice in Scooby-Doo history that I think we all forgot about, which is hot dog water. aka Velma's intellectual rival and 2-time redeemed villain of the week in Mystery Incorporated. So of course, I had to make her a part of this story too, so that we can actually give them the relationship that they deserved. And before y'all even say anything, I didn't make this up. The producer himself confirmed it. This is public knowledge. That aside, I want her friendship with the main cast to be the biggest part of her development and the foundation for the group forming Mystery Inc. Also, there's one more thing that you should know about my version of Velma. See, in the HBO version, she had hallucinations of creepy monsters and ghosts whenever she tried to solve a mystery. I didn't really like the way that it was used in the narrative of the show, but I did like the concept of Velma having some spooky hallucinations at random times. So I decided that my version of Velma does have visions, but in my version, her hallucinations are actually caused by a
Mysterious force.
trying to communicate with her. I already know what said mysterious force would be, but I don't want to say it just yet. So for her design, I decided to stick with her typical look, but update it to be a little bit more modern since my version would take place sometime between the early 2000s and now instead of the 60s. I wanted to make her the closest to the original design in Scooby-Doo. I gave her this off-the-shoulder sweater and a button-up shirt with her classic red skirt. I did that so I could keep that style of a high collar without necessarily going the turtleneck route. I also gave her boots because I felt like it was practical, and I also thought it was just a surprisingly good design choice for the HBO version of Velma. And of course, I made her a little bit chunky, since I thought it would be kind of cute and endearing. I don't know why, but I just love the idea of Velma being a little bit thick. I'm not biased, you're biased. Leave me alone. Overall, I just wanted to go with a very familiar but slightly modernized kind of vibe. So here's Velma. I really like this design and I had a lot of fun making it. Hopefully my version seems a little bit less hateable. But anyways, it's time to move on to Shaggy and Scooby. The Velma show introduces Norval, as this nice guy incel type, and he seems like a genuinely nice person at first, but eventually we see him being just as horrible as everybody else. Basically, he's introduced as being in love with Velma, for some fucking reason, and he's her only friend. Shocker. He also literally tries to do things for her to guilt trip her into loving him back, rather than, to be a good friend. Not that she's not completely unreasonable in her requests and how she treats him like a pack mule, but this intersection, so I'm gonna back off for a minute. He does end up getting with his character Gigi, who tries to help Norval understand that Velma ain't shit and that he needs to kick her to the curb. Get rid of the toxic friend, if you can even call her that. And he finally does for like 1 or 2 episodes after she gets his dad arrested for a crime he didn't commit, but he also fumbles the bag with the one person who was trying to look out for him.
The serial killer is near my cabin and you didn't tell me? The hottest remaining girl at the school?
I wasn't expecting you to be here. Also, for what it's worth, Daphne is technically hotter. You just have a mildly better personality.
But yeah, I just hate this guy. Oh yeah, and I feel like there's something missing. Oh right.
Where are you?
So of course, my version of Shaggy and Scooby are a package deal, but Scooby's just a regular dog that Shaggy found on the side of the road as a puppy. And obviously I went for a typical Great Dane with his classic collar with a couple of small changes. No point in trying to fix something that ain't broke. As for Shaggy, I decided that he's struggling to find his place in the world. He hates the state of his town and he hasn't really figured out what he wants his life to look like yet. But most of it stems from the fact that he lacks confidence in his own judgment at times. That's where Scooby comes in. So a lot of people already assume that the original Shaggy was a stoner, and a lot of people also constantly bring up the fact that Scooby can talk and like nobody really seems to care. So I decided to make Shaggy a stoner. Wait, please don't click off. Basically, my version of Shaggy smokes to cope with his issues. More specifically, when he does that around Scooby, he has hallucinations of Scooby talking to him. Long story short, Scooby acts as a kind of voice of reason for Shaggy because he always looked at Scooby as his safe space. But he became overly dependent on Scooby's hallucination advice whenever he starts to panic. And Shaggy knows it's not good for him. I mean, his parents always raised him to be mindful and take care of his mental health by developing good coping tactics. They constantly try to uplift him and let him know that they just want the best for him. But despite all that, he still doubts himself, and in secret, he still turns to less healthy methods for a short-term fix for his anxieties. And his new girlfriend Gigi wants to help him stop, but he rejects her help at first since he feels like it's the only way that he can really deal with his own issues. But he eventually realizes that Scooby's advice was always just what he already knew in his mind and in his heart. That's when he decides to stop. He eventually learns to trust himself and his ability to confront his problems, and he develops better coping habits. He also eventually decides that he wants to be a psychology major so that one day he can help people who struggle with the same issues as him in a healthy way so that they don't turn to substances like he did in the past. As for his design, I actually went with the first thing that came to my mind. I decided to focus on giving Shaggy comfortable, loose-fit clothes since I imagine him with this chill, laid-back kind of energy most of the time. So I gave him a big old hoodie with some baggy cargo pants for comfort and a little bit of gold jewelry for some style points. I almost gave him lock jewelry, but then I figured that it would be just a little bit too much for Shaggy. Also, don't worry, the stereotype is not lost on me that he's a stoner with locks. I may hate the stereotype, but if we're gonna make him black, we're gonna need to give him a better design than these old yee ass wigs. Do better! And the design was giving off this skater boy type vibe, which sounds about right for Shaggy. So y'all already know that I had to give him some classic all-stars to complete the look. So here's my design for Shaggy and Best Boy Scooby-Doo. I'm really happy with how this one came out, and despite it being so simple, I really had a lot of fun coming up with the concept. Now let's get to Daphne. So in the Velma show, Daphne is essentially adopted by these two lesbian cops, and she's looking for her birth parents, who are also criminals for some reason. She also has a quote-unquote high-risk personality, even though we never really get to see that personality trait. Oh, and she's also introduced as a drug dealer. Anyways, I really don't like her, and her design was mid, but at least she wasn't as bad as Velma. Speaking of Velma, apparently she and Daphne used to be friends, and now they hate each other. But they end up falling in love with each other without actually resolving any of their issues? I mean, she straight mollywopped Daphne with a crowbar. What is this? Then again, she's also irritating as hell, but more so because they keep giving her interesting stuff, but never actually want to play with those things on screen, so I just don't even care about her character. I don't care. Moving on. So my version of Daphne is a journalism major, and she also writes for the school paper. A lot of people in Coolsville, especially for some reason, students in Coolsville University have been going missing to the point where it's starting to almost become a weekly thing. So Daphne mostly writes about the missing students who don't get that much coverage in the news on TV. She's also the main person who convinces Velma to open herself up to others again. She's basically that one extroverted friend that everybody has who's always trying to make people feel included. She's pretty popular, but the thing is that while she's genuinely a nice person who loves being around people, she's actually pretty lonely. See, Daphne has a lot of friends in college, but sometimes she feels like she's not really making lifelong connections. She's definitely a people person, but for her, it's hard for her to know who's really going to be there for her in the long run and who she's probably going to drift apart from after a while. In other words, basically the quote, people come into your life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. Obviously it's not that deep for some people, but for Daphne, it means everything. Her parents are usually away on business trips or even vacations, and after her big sister Dawn moved out and started her own business, Daphne was pretty much left alone. But obviously all that changes when she meets the rest of the group. I would say that she's very much the heart of the group and that she's always trying to encourage everyone to get along. But that does not mean that she will not kick some butt, cause she knows karate. This girl is working towards getting her black belt. Overall, she's a very kind and capable person, and in terms of vibes, I would say she's probably kind of like a mix between Trini and Kimberly from Power Rangers. So for her design, I decided to give her this casual, almost kind of like social media influencer type of look. By this point, you might have already noticed that I gave every single member some kind of black or really dark colored element in their design to show that this is a slightly more mature version of the Scooby-Doo universe, the Scooby-verse if you will. So for Daphne, I gave her this black headband, along with some leggings that fade from black to this light pinkish purple, kind of like Blake from Ruby. Speaking of Ruby, I also gave her this crop top with a Nora style heart cutout, and this skirt inspired by Shiki from The World Ends With You. Side note, my version of Daphne would just straight up wear her clothes during the summer or something, but I also didn't want to just steal the whole design, so I just took the skirt. I'm not really sure how well I did on this, but I really wanted to show off her femininity in this. One thing that I always really liked about Daphne was the fact that she was always this hyper feminine but also very capable person. Originally, she was portrayed as this quote-unquote danger-prone damsel in distress type character, but as the years went on, she became more so the type to ride a motorcycle and throw some hands, and then fix her makeup right afterwards. Also, she's usually the one to find clues for the gang to use. I'm just happy with how she evolved over the years while managing to maintain her hyper feminine vibe. It really just shows that her feminine traits and interests were never really a weakness for her. Especially in the live action movies. I mean, that woman had me in a chokehold.
I love the kind of woman that can kick my ass.
She would've got tired of seeing my ass at that point, that's all I gotta say. But anyways, here's Daphne. Not my favorite, but I might try again with her design later on, but for now I'm calling it done. Now time to move on to Freddy. So, depending on who you ask, Fred actually got the worst of it. Fred used to be our autism-coded prince who was always fixated on weird shit, but now he's just weird, and not that whimsical, wholesome type either. Now he's just a punching bag for this show's quote-unquote comedy. This time around, HBO decided to make Fred as stupid and infantilized as possible, to the point where this man never even went through puberty. I'd say I was joking, but that's actually in the show, that's a plot point. Freddy is a mess in this show. He's seen as this conventionally attractive guy with no brain in his head, but they also take it to the point where he literally starts baby talking.
Ah, crap, I'm all syrupy. Bathies!
I mean, homeboy can't even cut his own steak. This is almost a grown man. This is embarrassing. Get this man off the screen. I'm not watching that. Anyways, for my version, I made Fred a kinesiology major and the captain of the school's track team. Of course, I made him a big old himbo because it's Fred. I mean, the man is the proto-himbo. What are you talking about? But I also wanted to give him a more interesting story than just being whatever the fuck that is. So I decided to try and expand on his role as a leader and how it affects him as a person. See, his dad was the captain of the track team back in the 80s, and his old teammates admired him so much that they still check in on his family and talk about how much of a great leader and a good man he was. And before Fred's dad passed away, he gave Fred his old varsity jacket, kind of like a passing of the torch kind of thing. Long story short, Fred looks at becoming the track team captain as upholding this legacy left by his dad. And he does have the skill, which is why he was the team captain back in high school, and why he became the team captain at the university. But what he has in athletic skills, he lacks in leadership skills. Fred is more like a boss who barks orders at people and who doesn't really consider the feelings and needs of his teammates, rather than being an actual leader. But after meeting the rest of the gang and becoming a part of Mystery Incorporated, he learns that he needs to become a much more empathetic and kind person to become a better leader. And don't get me wrong, he's not a bad guy or anything, he's actually pretty cool. But the thing about it is, Fred's dad never instilled that in him. Actually, it was the opposite. It's just that Fred's whole perspective on what a leader should be got shifted without his father's guidance. Also, Fred's lack of leadership skills would definitely put him at odds with his track teammates, but I thought it'd be kind of interesting to make it so that he doesn't really have a choice but to learn how to be a better leader. Because his track coach is basically just like, look, you got the skill, but if you don't get your stuff together, you just off the team. And the thing about it is, if he's off the team, he doesn't get the scholarship money, which means he's kind of at risk of not attending the university. So not only does he just want to be a better leader in general, at the same time, it's a little bit of pressure on him. I think I would say that he and Velma would butt heads the most, with Shaggy and Daphne in the middle, especially Daphne. And they would definitely go back and forth about who's a better fit to call the shots. But eventually the two of them would start to get along, especially since they can both relate on losing a parent and wanting to be just like them. So for his design, I actually gave him his dad's varsity jacket and some pretty simple athletic clothes like a white performance shirt, vintage running shorts, compression pants, and orange running shoes. And obviously, it ain't Fred without his ascot, but instead I gave him this orange bandana that he wears every day. My version of Freddy is a little bit superstitious and he considers his bandana lucky. 9 times out of 10, you're gonna see it on him. He might change up how he wears it, but he's gonna be wearing it. Then I gave him this spiky Sonic or Kid Flash-like hair to really get that speedster type feel. I also typically see Fred presented as this pretty strong guy. I mean, even in the video game where he's built like an uncooked noodle, his special ability is his physical strength. So I decided to make him kind of beefy to show that athletic ability, especially in his legs. I could have pushed it a little bit more, but I'm pretty sure y'all get the point. But anyways, that's Fred done. I'm really happy with how he turned out and I hope y'all like his design too. And now without further ado, onto my story synopsis of my hypothetical rendition of Velma. And now that we got the main characters out of the way, let's try to save the concept for Velma, because HBO clearly didn't know what they were doing. Obviously, as a series in the Scooby-Doo franchise, we gotta have some kind of decent mystery instead of just a bunch of bad meta jokes with a dumb plot that's held together with duct tape and bubblegum. But alright, it's time to see if we can fix this mess. Here's the pitch. 8 years ago, Velma's mother, Delia Dinkley, went missing during an investigation gone wrong, involving rumors of a cult and 3 missing girls. After a few years of searching, the official story is that the investigation went cold and Delia died in the process. But Velma never really bought that. Either way, not too long after that, even more people started to go missing, to the point where it was almost expected that every week, another person would be reported to have mysteriously disappeared. On top of that, many people began to report sightings of monsters and ghosts, blaming the many disappearances on them. And because of all this sudden supernatural activity, the residents of Coolsville decided to nickname the town Ghoulsville. A little bit corny, I know, but I mean, hey, it's Scooby-Doo, it's bound to get corny. Anyways, fast forward to the present, Velma decides that she wants to become a detective and uncover the mysteries of Coolsville while surviving her new life as a college student. And it all starts with a strange journal and a rumor of a mysterious ghost haunting the library of Coolsville University. And that's the main synopsis for my concept. But now it's time to move on to some other details for the story. Long story short, the rest of the plot would involve a classic villain of the week formula, and eventually, Velma, Daphne, Freddy, Shaggy, and Scooby-Doo band together to form Mystery Incorporated. But after a certain point in the story, the gang would discover more and more clues that lead them to a cult named the Bedlam Society. The Bedlam Society is a group that worships an unknown deity that grants them access to what they call the other side, a realm that embodies human fear. The only things that are known about the deity right now is that it's believed to be directly tied to and affected by the other side, and that it demands constant sacrifice. But by sacrifice, I don't mean the typical kind where someone has to die. See, when someone is sacrificed to this deity, their soul is ripped from their body, and the body becomes possessed, and the souls of its victims become trapped in the other side, and the deity continues to feed on their fear. It's currently unknown what the cult's reasoning for this is, though. Now, about that plot point about Velma having visions, in my version, Velma recently started to have hallucinations of different locations, creatures, and objects that are all somehow tied to the larger mystery, but she just can't seem to make any sense of it. And remember how I said that some mysterious force is trying to get through to her? Well, eventually her visions become more vivid and she starts to hear a distorted voice calling to her. it seems that something from the other side wants her to solve this mystery. Or maybe someone. Anyways, that's the bare bones of the main storyline. Obviously, Mystery Incorporated was one of my main inspirations, but I also took a little bit of inspiration from the original Scooby-Doo Where Are You show, as well as the direct-to-DVD films. I also took some inspiration from shows like Gravity Falls and even Wednesday. I wanted the tone to be a bit spooky, but also a little bit playful. Like, the mystery and supernatural elements are serious, but the characters and the relationships keep it grounded and fun. And I wanted the gang to slowly learn how to trust each other and develop as people to build toward the formation of Mystery Inc., not just as a team, but kinda like a found family. You know, instead of completely hating each other for the entire story.
HBO!
And obviously, there'd be monster fights, trap building, ghost hunting, and all other sorts of Scooby-Doo tropes that we all know and love, just aged up a little bit for a college setting with a darker edge and an overarching mystery that keeps things intriguing. That's all I really have to say for this section, but I think I might eventually do a follow-up video so that we can get into the concepts for some of these monsters and the real mystery of Coolsville. Also, here are the final drawings. Well, one final drawing and one sketch. I'll just end up finishing the other one later. These took me so long to work on, so I hope that you guys like them. And that's the concept for my version of Velma. So what do y'all think? Did I make a better version of Velma, or did I just waste 2 months of my life? Please tell me I did it better. I need some validation. I'm begging you, please. But anyways, that's all I got for today. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you liked it, and let me know what you think of it in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe, and slap that little gray bell so that you get all the newest notifications. Thanks again for watching, and as always, I'll see you in the next video. Bye!